to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest as it pertains to two-division, unified current reigning bantamweight champion Dina Thorsland and a mandatory challenger from Turkey, Cetin. Turkey Professional Boxing Federation is reporting that the WBC, WBO, and Ring Magazine bantamweight world champion Dina Thorsland will defend her titles next month on the 24th in Denmark against Cetin, her mandatory challenger by way of the WBC, who defeated Mary Romero last April for the WBC silver title. Defeated is one way to put it. Barely survived is yet another.
I think Cetin was very fortunate to be awarded the decision.
She was.
In that fight because she didn't look good in that fight. And ahead of this one with Dina Thorsland, I think she's biting off more than she can chew. I don't think she's ready for this.
Too soon. Dina Thorsland sports a professional record, an unblemished record of 20 wins with no losses, no draws, 8 knockouts, and she's been a champion at both super bantamweight and bantamweight. Currently, she holds both the WBC and WBO titles alongside the Ring Magazine belt at 118 pounds. Cetin is her mandatory challenger, and she's a good fighter, a young fighter, a pressure fighter.
Still very rough around the edges.
But that's what she is. She's a pressure fighter, whereas Dina Thorsland, she's a boxer-puncher, a strong one, a fast one, an athletic one, an experienced one, more experienced than Cetin. I think that Cetin's handlers, they're putting her in this fight far too soon. It's far too early. With just 11 wins, no losses, and no draws, with 7 recorded knockouts, Cetin, she needs more marination, more time to cook, more time to develop. They want to grab the bull by the horns. They want to challenge Dina straight away. I don't think it's a good idea.
Not based on what I saw in Cerin's last fight.
In Cetin's last fight, she came up against veteran fighter and former EBU champion of Spain, Mary Romero, who more often than not, she fights just like Cetin. She's a pressure fighter, just like Cetin, but she decided to break character in that fight, and she decided to move and punch. She decided to box.
With Cetin giving chase.
Mary was able to effectively set her up on her way in, walk her into punches. Mary Romero being a stronger and more experienced fighter than most of the fighters that Cetin had fought so far. Mary, who is many years older than Cetin, showed a much better engine, much better cardio, and more ring savvy, while effectively out-hustling Cetin, the younger and less experienced fighter.
Cetin was tired.
Badly gassed out, following Mary Romero around the ring, throwing ineffective shots, flat punches with no snap on them. What you had to consider is that Mary Romero was actually a lot older than Cetin, 12 years older to be exact. She was 37 years old going into that fight, whereas Cetin is 25, but it was Cetin that was exhausted. It was Cetin that the pace caught up to. What that tells me is that for Cetin, those eggs need more bacon. She needs more rounds in the bank. She needs more experience, and she needs to learn how to pace herself, because if you're gassing out with a fighter that's 12 years older than you are, the age gap between you and Dina...
Currently, Cetin is 26. Dina Thorsland's 30.
You were just struggling with a fighter that's pushing 40. I expect that the night of the fight, because Dina Thorsland was more active last year than Cetin was. Dina Thorsland, she fought 2 times. She fought once in February, then again in September, against this division's reigning WBC champion at the time, Yuli Hangaluna, who she beat in one-sided fashion.
Because Dina was more active last year than Cetin, in spite of Cetin being a few years younger, I expect that Dina's going to be a lot sharper.
Dina's been more active. She fought 2 times last year, whereas Cetin, in spite of being the younger fighter and the developing fighter, she's been averaging 1 fight a year for the last 2 years. She fought Eva Voraberger in 2022. That's the only fight she had that year, and she fought Mary Romero in April of last year. That's the only fight she had that year.
So between Dina already having the right base style for the job and already being a more experienced fighter than Cetin, I'd wager a bigger puncher as well and more athletic, lighter on her feet.
And don't forget that this is going down in Denmark, Dina's neck of the woods. Dina will have home field advantage. Dina Thorsland to win. Dina Thorsland on points conservatively is the logical choice. Set to go down later on next month.
Good that Dina's getting back out there so early in the year because that would free her up to come back in the summer months, then again in the winter.
Perhaps for a unification match with one of the other champions at the weight. Perhaps for a unification against Nina Hughes, reigning WBA champion, who we talked about in my previous video. She ain't got no fight date, no dance partner right now. I could go for a fight between her and Dina so long as Dina takes care of business, and I think she's going to.
Conservatively, I like Dina Thorsland on points in Denmark next month.
In men's super lightweight news, Eddie Hearn has said Devin Haney may now defend his WBC super lightweight world title versus mandatory challenger Sandor Martin next, or he could potentially move straight up to welterweight for a bigger fight. And I gotta tell you, Devin Haney's a capable fighter, a great pure boxer, and in many ways so is Sandor Martin. He's very effective, very good at what he does. But two outside fighters, two outside jabbers, two pure boxers in the same ring, that is not a good stylistic matchup. It just isn't. In spite of the precedent set by the WBC installing Sandor Martin as Devin's mandatory challenger, I gotta tell you, I do not want to see this fight. Because unless somebody breaks character, unless somebody decides they're gonna switch things up a bit, change them up, and step into their shots and take it to the other guy, this has the potential to be one of the most boring fights in the entire history of the sport. Think
Rancis Bartolome versus Robert Easter. That's surefire cure to insomnia.
The real issue is, if Devin Haney wants to stay WBC champion at 140 pounds, he has to take care of this guy. And even though I'm not a fan of this stylistic matchup, and I don't actually want to see this fight, that would be the consequence of not making it. That would be the consequence of not having it. The WBC title would go to Sandor Martin. Sandor Martin, who capped off 2022 losing a split decision to Teofimo Lopez in a fight that some people thought Sandor won. He has since rebounded off that loss. Unbeknownst to most, he fought 2 times last year and won 2 times last year. That's how he got here.
He's the mandatory challenger.
Sporting a professional record of 42 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 15 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 45 professional bouts. It's safe to say that Sandor Martin, he's a capable fighter. He's good at what he does, but pure boxer versus pure boxer.
No gracias.
I don't want to find out which one of you guys can stay on the balls of your feet and stay on the outside for 36 minutes. That is not an entertaining matchup. So what is Devin Haney going to do? Devin Haney, who's grown accustomed over time to making good money, very good money. Devin is a 7-figure fighter. The problem is that commercially, this is not a hot ticket. This is not a big fight, but Devin is going to want big money. That's the problem with fighters and their managers and their teams these days. They treat the situation as if every fight has the same commercial value, to where they never want to go backwards on the money.
And this is an even lesser known guy than Regis Prograis. Sandor Martin, nothing against him, but only really hardcore boxing fans are aware of this fighter, know that he exists.
You can't bill this as a pay-per-view. You cannot bill this as a box office fight just to satisfy Devin's financial demands. The demand on the ground from the fans, it's not there. This is not a hot ticket, and all you're going to end up doing trying to bill this as a pay-per-view is burning through cash needlessly. This is the kind of fight you've got to give it away. It's got to be part of a regular schedule, and I don't know if Devin's going to go for that, because Devin wants to make a lot of money every single fight.
Well, I'm sorry, but you can't do that with this.
If you thought Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos was boring, put Devin in the ring with Sandor Martin and watch what happens. In fact, don't watch what happens.
Go make a lasagna.
Eddie Hearn suggested that the alternative is moving up to 147. Moving up to 147 straight away, but who up there makes for a decent-sized fight for Devin Haney? They played with the idea of getting Mario Barrios in the ring, but Mario Barrios' name is also attached to a potential Jaron Boots Ennis fight.
Didn't they call out Keith Thurman, too?
Haney versus Barrios, or Haney versus Thurman, in terms of styles and profiles, those make for bigger and more entertaining fights than, say, a Sandor Martin fight. I don't want to see a Sandor Martin fight. The issue is that PBC guys are fucking morons. You think about Keith Thurman, who's currently coming up on 2 years of inactivity for the third time?
He was inactive for 2 years after the Danny Garcia fight, or close to it. Inactive for 2 years again after the loss to Manny Pacquiao. And after having outpointed Mario Barrios,
Next month will have been 2 years since that fight. I mean, you can make him an offer, but with PBC guys, in some instances, most actually, they'd rather sit out. They'd rather not fight.
What about Mario?
Mario Barrios' name is attached to a potential Jaron Ennis fight. I would say it depends on whoever offers Mario the most money, but PBC guys have a penchant for shooting themselves in the foot. The money they offered Jamal Charlo, the unified titles with Demetrius Andre, great money. The money they offered Gervonta Davis, the unified titles with Tevin Farmer.
the money Dillian White offered Andy Ruiz, the money they offered both Adam Kovnowski and Luis Ortiz to fight Anthony Joshua.
The money Eddie Hearn offered Gary Russell, the unified titles with Josh Warrington.
These guys are fucking morons.
So I'm not sure what's gonna happen now. As it pertains to yet another champion at 140 pounds, WBO and Ring Magazine champion Teofimo Lopez on his coming out of retirement. I wasn't gonna retire, it was a publicity stunt. You've gotta know how to work the media, just like when I said, do I still got it? After the Sandor Martin fight, and then I used it after beating Josh Taylor. Teofimo wants
Needs.
me and you to believe
Oh, that was a publicity stunt.
stinking out the joint and getting knocked down by Sandor Martin. Was that part of the publicity stunt too? Let me tell you something. Teofimo's a talented fighter. He's a good young fighter, but he's dumb as a box of rocks.
He's trying to rewrite history.
Pretending that while he was openly questioning himself after a lackluster showing, that was all to work the media. That's what he was doing. He was working the media, and when he claimed that he had retired from the sport of boxing, that was a publicity stunt. That was for publicity as well.
Maybe that was.
Huh?
Maybe.
Maybe calling out Subriel Matias was a publicity stunt. Maybe calling out Terence Crawford was a publicity stunt. Teofimo said, I did call out Crawford at 147. I'm not here to play games. I want to fight the best. The fighters Crawford fought were handicapped. Spence just announced about his eye. Jose Benavidez had a shot leg. Kell Brook was injured too with his eye. Every fighter Crawford has faced at 147 has been injured. I'm healthy. Fight the best fighter at a healthier weight. Let's do it. So maybe when Teofimo says all this stuff about Terence Crawford, denigrating all of his victories, claiming he's willing to fight him when he already has a fight lined up, and when he knows that Terence is otherwise preoccupied,
Right.
he's busy. Maybe that's a publicity stunt. Maybe that's you trying to, quote-unquote, work the media. This is what I mean when I say that
He's as dumb as a box of rocks.
he's a fucking moron. When he claimed to be retired from the sport of boxing, who believed him? You're telling the world, you're telling the boxing media that you're retiring from the sport of boxing at a time when no one believes you to do what?
What?
To accomplish what?
What was the end game?
You called out Subriel Matias for what was supposed to be a unification match at a time that you knew he was injured. You're now calling out Terence Crawford at a time when you know he's busy, he's otherwise preoccupied, and you're doing this to accomplish what?
What?
To do what?
What?
You're fighting Jermaine Ortiz.
So what's the end game? You're making all of these disingenuous call-outs. You're selling all these wolf tickets just so you could fight Jermaine Ortiz.
You're trashing Terence Crawford's resume and some of his more high-profile victories so far. You're trashing that guy just so that you can fight somebody else. If you were trashing him en route to a fight with him, then I could understand. Then I could see, because then you're actually selling a fight. But you're not doing that because you're not fighting Crawford.
What the fuck are you doing?
You're making excuses for Errol Spence, excuses for Kell Brook, excuses
Huh?
for Jose Benavidez. Is that what you're doing?
Huh?
I can do the same thing. Vasyl Lomachenko went into your fight with him injured. He had an injured shoulder. Josh Taylor, the only reason you beat him is because he stayed at the weight too long. He was drained, and we saw that before he even fought you. We saw that in the Jack Catterall fight. And Terence Crawford would never lose to a guy like George Kambosos. But you did. And what did you do after that? You made excuses. Oh, you got asthma in your chest, you got asthma.
You got bronchitis, you got pneumonia, what do you want, some tea? Does the baby want his baba?
You're gonna make excuses for Terence Crawford's opponents. That same science, that same logic can be applied to you. The pendulum swings both ways. If you're gonna say Spence had cataracts and Jose got shot, we can say Loma had an injured shoulder, Josh Taylor was out too long, he was inactive for a year going into the Lopez fight, and we all know he was killing himself to make the weight.
Jack Catterall already beat him before you, a year before you fought him.
But Teofimo Lopez, he doesn't live under a rock. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to stir the pot, but stir the pot to what end? All you're doing is making yourself look like a charlatan.
That wasn't a good faith offer you made to Subriel Matias. You only did that because you knew he was injured. With Crawford, you're only calling him out because you know that he's busy. You know he's tied up.
And to what end are you doing all this? Do you want to make yourself seem more disingenuous to the boxing fans, more disingenuous to the boxing community? Because that's all you're really doing. You're latching on to the names of fighters that people are currently talking about at this time. Terence Crawford got a lot of publicity for the shellacking that he just laid on Errol Spence Jr. in the previous year. And now what you're trying to do is ride his wave, knowing that you're not going to fight him. This call-out, it's not even genuine.
Crawford wouldn't get himself beat dicking around by a guy like George Kambosos.
And he wouldn't get upstaged in his own neck of the woods by a guy like Sandor Martin. So when he takes shots at Terence Crawford like this, I don't know, unless the end game, the goal, is to make himself a social pariah, that if you're ruffling feathers for the sake of ruffling feathers, congratulations, but all that's going to cause people to do is put a harsh light on you.
You know, that's the issue that I have with the American boxing scene that we don't see that much of in the UK boxing scene or the Eastern European boxing scene, the Asian boxing scene, the Australian boxing scene.
Too many shenanigans, too much bullshit, and not enough boxing. When Ryan Garcia calls out a Devin Haney just to double back and focus on somebody else, when Teofimo calls out fighters that he knows he's not going to fight.
It's wolf tickets. It's too much bullshit and not enough boxing. Too much bluffing and not enough boxing.
It's the problem I got with the American boxing scene and a lot of American-based fighters. They turn the place into a goddamn circus, and they do it needlessly because you're not fighting Terence Crawford, and we all know that, just like we all knew you weren't really retired. So what the hell was the point in saying that?
He was working the media.
Working my goddamn nerves. I'm not one of these content creators that wants to be a member of your street team or be your friend. I'm not that guy. I'm just a consumer through and through, and I'm all out of patience for the circus that is the American boxing scene. Why say all this stuff? Why talk about this guy and why call him out when you know you're not gonna fight him?
You know, at least when David Adelaide crashed Fabio Wortley's party, crashed his interview, it's because he was pursuing a fight. I mean, that's what he was doing. He wasn't just talking to be talking.
Carolyn Dubois calls out a Rhiannon Dixon. She's not talking because she's got a mouth. She's doing it because she's pursuing a fight, whereas here with Teofimo, you're not pursuing a fight with Terence Crawford. You're just riding his wave.
You better just focus on Jermaine Ortiz before you get George Kambosos again.
Comprendo, friendo.